The God who loves us through thick and thin, no matter what, will never leave us, never forsake us. We're going to talk today about letting God be God in our lives. You know, a lot of people trying to find, we all need to know that we're important. We all need to know that we have value and significance, worth. We need to know that we're secure. Those are some of the basic needs of every human being. Every one of us feels that. But the question is, where do we go to find those things? Where do we go to find our value? Where do we go to find our sense of well-being, our sense of worth, sense of security? Some people look for it in power, some in money, some in popularity, relationships. There's all kinds of things people look for it in. And sometimes when those things fail them, they don't know what to do. There are people who even take their lives because the thing that they trusted in, they thought would give them a sense of worth and value, make them important. They take their lives when that thing fails them. I remember even back in 2008, the economic bust in that time, there were some people that took their lives, that killed themselves because of the money they lost. And all the security was wrapped up in those financial things. And when that was gone, there was nothing else left to live for. I think another thing that people sometimes find their sense of value in, their worth, is their own goodness. We talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about that ladder theology and how some people work their way to heaven, and how that rich man came to Jesus one day and he said, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And you remember Jesus said, do these laws. And he was so excited because he thought, wow, I've got it, I've nailed it. And then Jesus said, there's only one thing you lack. Sell everything you have and go give it to the poor and come and follow me. And he couldn't do it, could he? He went away sad because God was not first in his life. His stuff was. And he couldn't let go of that. That's where his value came from. So some people look to their goodness. They think, okay, as long as I follow the rules, as long as I'm a pretty good person, and they look around at everyone else around them, and they look and they find out that, hey, I'm better than this person over here, and I'm a lot better than this person over here, so hey, I must be pretty good. Look how great I am. Look how valuable I am. And then things don't go the way they want it to go. Sometimes the bottom falls out of their lives. They experience troubles and trials, and they get angry with God, and they think, God, wait a minute. I've been a good person. I've done all the right things. I've checked all the boxes. Aren't you supposed to bless me? And they get angry with God when God doesn't respond the way they think he should. I think that emphasis on our goodness and expecting God to bless us just because we have done certain things or lived a certain life may be Satan's number one tool for keeping lost people away from God and for blinding Christians to the true source of their self-worth, their value. Well, today, I want to talk about a man who lived a long time ago. And he had an encounter with God that changed his life, that challenged where he put his confidence, that challenged where he put his trust. Because you see, he was trusting in his own goodness for his value, for his relationship with God, and God put that to the test. The man's name was Job. Remember Job? Everybody knows about the story of Job. Job was a very rich man, but Job was also a very good man. Let me share with you the first verses of Job. Job 1, verse 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God, and he shunned evil. It's pretty good, isn't it? Verse 2. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. And he had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Pretty good so far, isn't it? Pretty good guy. Verse 4. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So he would even sacrifice just in case. Okay, he would sacrifice just in case his children might have sinned so he could cover them. But then one day, Satan comes to God. And Satan challenges God with Job's situation. Basically, Satan says to God, God, you have blessed Job beyond measure, amazingly. But the only reason he trusts you, the only reason he does good, the only reason he believes in you is because you have given him such a cushy life. And if you take all that away, he'll curse you to your face. And so God let Satan upend Job's life. Not to hurt Job, mind you, but to help him, to help mature him. But still, in the process, Job lost everything. He lost his home. He lost his sons. He lost his daughter. He lost all his possessions. Everything was gone. And at this point in his life, Job looks around him, everything devastated around him. And his attitude is pretty incredible. Listen to this. Chapter 1, verse 20. At this, Job got up and he tore his robe. He was grieving, wasn't he? And he shaved his head, and then he fell to the ground and worshiped. Listen to this. He fell to the ground and he worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And in all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Remember, we sang those words just a little bit ago, didn't we? Blessed be your name. The Lord gives, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He's worshiping the Lord, even in the midst of everything being gone, devastation around him. His children gone, and he worships the Lord. And he didn't charge the Lord with wrongdoing. Not yet. Not yet. Hold on. So Satan comes again, and Satan attacks him personally, physically, and left him wallowing in a pile of dirt, scraping the pus out of the sores on his body. Job's less than supportive wife comes to him and says, why don't you just curse God and die? What a great wife. Why don't you just curse God and die? She of course, was incredibly devastated over this. But still, Job's attitude is incredible. Chapter 2, verse 10, Job replied to her, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? And in all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. You know, if you just read those first 2 chapters of Job, you go, wow, what a guy, what a man. Everything is gone. All his family, all his possessions, his own health has been just devastated. And still he's saying the Lord is given, the Lord's taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Shall we accept good and not trouble? Hey, let's praise God. How many of you could have that kind of attitude? Incredibly difficult. And yet that's what we see in Job at this point in his life. So at this point, several friends come to visit. I put friends in quotation marks because they're friends, but they don't exactly support him very much. They are horrified at Job's condition. And they come and they sit in silence for 7 days. Isn't that interesting? They don't say a word for 7 days. They just sit around him for 7 days and look at him, grieve with him. You know what they're doing? That's a funeral wake. They are expecting Job to die. And they are sitting in silence in a funeral wake around him, expecting any minute he's going to kick off. But he doesn't. And finally, Job speaks. Finally, Job talks again after these 7 days. And we begin to see how deeply Job has been wounded, how deep he is hurting, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally as well. Chapter 3, verse 1. After this, Job opened his mouth and he cursed the day of his birth. Listen. He cursed the day of his birth. And he said, may the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. That day, may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine upon it. He goes on, chapter 3, verse 11. Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Chapter 3, verse 16. Or why was I not hidden away in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? Verse 25, chapter 3. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. Job is betraying here something that he was feeling all along. He's feeling like, I've got to keep doing all these good things. I've got to keep sacrificing. I've got to keep serving God this way because if I don't, bad things are going to happen. And he says, what I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. Well, this little speech about how he was feeling at this moment prompts Job's friends to start chiming in. They start talking after all these days. They should have kept their mouths shut. They should have just been quiet and been silent, but they felt like they needed to help Job a little bit. They needed to correct him. Sometimes we do that. We jump in and we feel like we've got to say a word of correction. We've got to say a word to help people understand a little better what they're going through, and that's how they're feeling. We're going to jump in and we're going to help Job. And their message to Job is basically this, if I could summarize it. Job, you know that we reap what we sow. We reap what we sow. People are blessed. Bad people are cursed. So even though we haven't seen it with our own eyes, you must have been a very bad person. Because look at how badly you're suffering. That's basically what they're saying to him. We haven't seen it. All we've seen is the good stuff. But behind closed doors, you must have been a bad person and done some very wicked things because you are suffering so bad. Good people get blessed. Bad people suffer. I'll give you just a few samples of their speeches. Eliphaz, chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. One of the friends, he says, consider now, who being innocent has ever perished, and where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. At the breath of God they perish, at the blast of his anger they are no more. So there you see the gist of what the friends were thinking. I've never seen the righteous people suffer. I've just seen wicked people suffer. That's the way it works. Another friend, Zophar, chapter 11, verse 6, he says, know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin, Job. Isn't that interesting? Job, God has even forgotten some of your sin. You have sinned so much that God has even forgotten some of it. Wow, what a friend. Okay, how would you like your friend to come to you and say that? Here's another friend, Eliphaz, chapter 22, verses 4 and 5. Is it for your piety, your righteousness, your goodness that he rebukes you and brings charges against you? Is not your wickedness great? God's not cursing you and bringing all these horrible things upon you because you're such a good person, Job. No. Your wickedness is great. I haven't seen it, but your wickedness is great. You have sinned against God. Now listen, you got to be honest for a minute. Have you ever thought that about people that are suffering? Or have you ever heard people say that about those who are suffering? And they say, wow, look at what that person is going through. They must have been a bad person. They must have done some bad things. Have you ever thought that? That thought ever crossed your mind? What did they do to deserve this? Maybe you've heard that, right? What did they do to deserve this kind of treatment? And when we do that, we're doing the same thing that Job's friends were doing to him. Or the reverse. We might say, look at all the blessing that person, look at all the riches they have. Look at the nice, cushy life they have. Wow, they must have been a really great person to deserve all that. And when we say that, we're falling into that same line of thinking as Job's friends. Those who do evil are cursed, they suffer, and those who do good are blessed. Now Job, when he hears his friends saying this, he just kind of comes unglued on them. And he begins to profess his innocence, to say, I haven't sinned, I have been good. Let me just read a few samples of what he says to them in response. Chapter 6, verse 24. Teach me and I will be quiet. Show me where I have been wrong. You tell me I've sinned, you show me. Tell me. Chapter 6, verse 30. Is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice? I know what wickedness is. I know what sin is. Chapter 13, verse 19. Can anyone bring charges against me? If so, I will be silent and I'll die. I'll just, right now, you go ahead. Bring charges against me. Show me where I've been wrong, and I will shut up and I'll just die right now. Okay? Chapter 13, verse 23. How many wrongs and sins have I committed? Show me my offense and my sin. Chapter 16, verse 16. My face is red with weeping, dark shadows ring my eyes, and yet my hands have been free of violence, and my prayer is pure. Hey guys, I'm suffering here, but I let you know it's not because I've been a bad guy. I am free of violence. My prayer is pure. Chapter 27 and verse 2. Now listen to this. Chapter 27, verse 2. Job says, as surely as God lives, who has denied me justice, the Almighty, who has made my life bitter. Now listen to what Job is doing here. He's trying to make sense of his suffering, as we all would. When we go through struggles, our first question is usually why? Why this, God? And what we're trying to do is understand. We're trying to make sense of all our suffering. But you see how Job does it? What he does there in 27:2, as surely as God lives, who has denied me justice, the Almighty, who has made my life bitter, he blames it on God. He says, it's God's fault that I'm suffering. It's not my fault. I have been a good person. It's God's fault. God is punishing me for no reason. God is unjust. God is cruel. God's uncaring. God is arbitrary. God lets the wicked prosper, and he crushes people like me, one of the good guys. And if God will just give me my day in court, God will just give me an opportunity, I will prove to him and prove to the world that I am right and he is wrong. Wow. Listen to Job say that. Verse 10, or chapter 10, verse 2. I say to God, talking to God now, I say to God, do not declare me guilty, but tell me what charges you have against me. God, don't just strike me down. Tell me why. Tell me what things you have against me, what charges you have against me, that you would cause these bad things to happen to me. Chapter 23, verse 2. Even today my complaint is bitter. His hand, God's hand, is heavy in spite of my groaning. If only I knew where to find him. He's talking about God. If only I knew where to find God. If only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say to me. Would he vigorously oppose me? No. He would not press charges against me. There the upright can establish their innocence before him, and there I would be delivered forever from my judge. Job wants his day in court. He wants to stand before the Almighty. He wants to stand before God and proclaim his innocence and say, God, you have punished me unjustly. You are wrong, not me. And I want to prove to you and I want to prove to the world that I am righteous man. Chapter 31, verse 35, he says, oh, that I had someone to hear me. I sign now my defense. I put it in writing. I sign it. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser, God, let God answer me and put his indictment in writing. Wow. When I read that, I go, oh, you talk to God that way? Wow. You ever done that? You ever gone through a struggle in your life that's so deep, so severe, that you come to God with that kind of attitude? Now, Job never cursed God. He never stopped believing in God. He maintained his faith in God all the way through this, but he certainly questioned God's character, didn't he? He questioned God's actions. He said, God, you're not really just, are you? One of the greatest qualities of God, one of the greatest attributes, we call it, of God's nature is that he is a just God. Means right, pure. He always does what is right. So Job says, you're not doing right, God. Wow, that's pretty audacious. To come to God and say, you're not doing the right thing. I am righteous, I am good, I am pure. I even sacrificed for my kids before they sin, just in case. But you have punished me. You have crushed me. And I am innocent. So he challenged the Almighty and he demanded an answer from God. No. Now pause here just a minute. Think about what Job is saying. I've been good, therefore I should be blessed. God, you are wrong. Job's theology is a little messed up here. His theology is a little skewed because all suffering is not the direct result of sin, our sin. It may be the result of living in a fallen world, a sin-sick world. But every time someone suffers something, it doesn't mean that they themselves had done something deserving of that. And just because, on the contrary, on the other hand, just because someone is blessed abundantly and richly in many ways, doesn't mean that they have done some good thing that they deserve all of that. We need to understand that in the Bible. Life is not so simple that it can be reduced to a formula. 2 + 2 = 4. You do this, and this is going to happen. Life is not so simple. You can't put it in a little package that way. Sometimes we just have to say, Lord, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but I will trust you. Regardless, I will let you be God in my life. And at this point, Job wasn't there. He wasn't there. So watch how God begins to help Job to change his understanding here a little bit. Now, all this time when the friends have been talking and Job has been going on and on and on, professing his innocence, challenging God's goodness, challenging God's justice, God has been listening. And he always does. He always does. Even when we are ranting, raving, and beside ourselves, struggles, God is listening because he cares about us. He cares about our hearts. He wants to help us. He has been standing in the background here listening to Job go on and on and on. But now it's God's turn. In the last chapters of Job, it's God's turn, and he begins to respond. But he doesn't respond as Job expected. He doesn't come on the scene and say, Job, you're right. Job, I wasn't thinking. Man, I really messed up this time, didn't I? I punished you and I shouldn't have. Boy, am I wrong. I am so sorry. No, it doesn't happen that way. God plays 21 questions with Job. But it's probably more than 21 questions. I didn't count them, but I think there's more. Anyway, and he begins to ask Job questions. Let's see how it works out. Chapter 38. Let's read a long section here. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm, and he said, who is this that obscures my plans or my counsel with words without knowledge? So right away he says, Job, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand. Let me help you. Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you. You shall answer me. Verse 4. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. God's being a little sarcastic here, isn't he? Surely you know. Surely you understand all this, Job. You say you understand everything about me. Surely you understand. You were there, weren't you, when I laid the foundations of the earth, right? Right? Come on, Job. On what were its footings set? Who laid the cornerstone of the earth while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the cloud its garments and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, thus far you may come and no farther, here's where your proud waves halt. I love the poetry that's here, the poetic way God's talking about how he created everything, even how far the waves of the ocean will come and where its waves will halt. He goes on, verse 12. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken. Verse 16, have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, Job? Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Job, you claim to understand me. You claim you've got it all together. You claim you have all this great understanding of what's happening in you. You tell me now. Tell me the answer to all these questions. Tell me if you understand all of this. And on it goes until chapter 40. And finally, Job responds to God, but his attitude has changed a little bit. He softened just a little bit. Listen, chapter 40, verse 3. Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, and I'll say no more. I shut up now. I've crossed a line, God. I realize that now. There's a lot I don't understand. I'll just shut up. I'll just be quiet. But God wasn't trying to get Job to shut up. He wasn't trying just to stop him from talking. He's trying to help him. He's trying to help him understand something very deep that he needs to know. And so the exam continues. Chapter 40, verse 6. Let me just read a couple of verses. Chapter 40, verse 6. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Verse 8. Listen to this. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Now there God puts his finger on the real issue. Job has said, God, you are unjustly punishing me. You're giving me what I don't deserve. So God comes back and says, would you discredit my justice? Would you take my just character and would you discredit that just to lift yourself up? Would you condemn me just to justify yourself? And finally, Job responds again, second time, and this time with a very different attitude. Chapter 42. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Listen to this, surely I spoke of things I did not understand, and things too wonderful for me to know. Job has changed, hasn't he? Deep humility here. He's saying, God, I realize now. You're asking me all these questions about things I don't understand. I wasn't there. I don't get it. I don't know. I don't have your power, your majesty. I don't know. You asked me, and I spoke of things that I don't understand. And then Job says this, very important. Verse 4. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. And then Job says this. I want you to get this. Verse 5. My ears had heard of you. But what? Now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself, and I repent in dust and ashes. After all of this, two big points hit Job. Two big lessons hit him right smack in the face. Number one, God, I don't understand. I don't get it. God is bigger than anything I, Job, or anyone can understand. God is bigger than any problems we face. God, I don't understand. So he confesses his humility there. He's humbled. But then, second thing, he says, God, now my eyes have seen you. This is so important, church, so important. Before, Job had only heard of God. He knew about God, but he had never had this encounter with God. He knew some things about God, but now he says, I see you. Now I see you, and that seeing made all the difference in Job. You see? It's one thing to hear about God, one thing to come to church and go through the worship and hear the sermons and all that, or even read the Bible and know some things about God. It's another thing to have this personal encounter with God and to see him in all his glory. And that's what happened to Job. That's what God did. God revealed to him who he really was. And that seeing God changed Job. It humbled him, but it made him see something bigger than he'd ever seen before. And just like it changed him, seeing God will change us as well. So here's the point I want you to get today. Here's what I want us to understand from Job. That our true value, our true worth, our true self-esteem and security and significance and all of that, that peace that passes understanding, that sense of well-being when a hurricane or a tornado wipes away everything you have, that sense of hope and joy, even when the doctor says, you've got 6 weeks. Where's that come from? None of this comes from the good that we do. None of it comes from how many good deeds we've done. It doesn't come from our wealth. It doesn't come from our looks. It doesn't come from our brains. Those are all worldly standards, okay? It doesn't come from how many religious rituals, how many worship services we've gone, how many sermons we've preached, how many songs we've led, whatever. It doesn't come from any of that. It doesn't come from what we think we know about God, what we've heard about God. I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from God himself. That sense of peace, a sense of security, a sense of knowing who we really are, that comes from God himself, from really seeing God, from accepting that God is in control, from resting in his arms in full and complete trust, no matter what. Like a little child. Like a little child who doesn't need to know all of the answers. It's enough to know that mom and dad know, and that's enough. I remember we used to go on trips, to wherever when I was just a kid, and I never went out and checked the oil. I never went out and kicked the tires to make sure, they're still holding on the car. Or I never looked at the map and make sure, we're on the right path. I just knew that mom and dad knew. And that was enough. I didn't have to understand all the details. And you see, that's what God's trying to tell Job and us. Your sense of well-being, your peace, your security, your joy, your hope even in the face of adversity comes from God himself, from that relationship with God, from knowing that he is there and he's in charge and he knows what's best. Trusting him regardless. So the answer that Job got was God himself. God didn't come on the scene and say, okay, now Job, you have these complaints. Let me go through, let me tick through them and answer all of your questions here. He doesn't do that. In fact, he's got questions for Job, doesn't he? So the point of the whole book is that God is our answer. There's a lot of things that you and I will never get. Not this side of heaven. There's a ton of stuff that we'll never understand in this world. Because bad things do happen to good people sometimes. It happens. It may happen to you and me. But what we know in the midst of all that is that God is there. And that God is good. And when that night is holding on, right? When that night is holding on, God is there. And he is holding on to us. And that's what God was trying to show Job here. Job was so caught up in this twisted theology of thinking that if you're bad, you're going to suffer. If you're good, you're going to be blessed. And he says it doesn't always work that way. Probably as a general rule of thumb, yes, we reap what we sow. Galatians 6 even says that. So as a general rule of thumb, yes, there's things that I might do that would bring on suffering in my life. But that doesn't mean that every time someone suffers, they have done something to deserve it. And that doesn't mean every time someone is blessed that they've done something to deserve that. Because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us. So life is not so simple. So God's trying to show that to Job and to us. Don't just bring life down to a formula like that and treat it that way. Instead, trust God. No matter what you go through, no matter what you experience, trust God. And when you get that, God, then you can be at peace no matter the circumstances, right? You know what Paul said? I've learned to be content no matter the circumstances, right? Philippians 4, verse 13. No matter what I'm going through. And he was sitting in a prison cell when he wrote that, not knowing whether he was going to live or die. And he was at peace. He was content. Not because of his circumstances, but because of his God. R.C. Sproul said this about the story of Job. He says, Job was satisfied. Even though God gave him no answers, Job's questions were put to rest. He received a higher answer than any direct reply could have provided. God answered Job's questions not with words. Listen to this. God answered Job's questions not with words, but with himself. You got that? He answered with himself. And as soon as Job saw who God was, that's all he needed. He was able to leave the details in God's hands. That's the peace that passes understanding. That's the kind of strength and hope that only God can provide. When we don't get all the details, it's okay. I mean, I'd like to know, but hey, if I don't, it's okay because I know who does. God does. And I'll trust him regardless. And so Job was okay. And when God came to him in the next verses and said, okay, now I want you to pray for your friends, who kind of abused you, didn't they? They were wrong. I want you to pray for them. And Job prayed for them. And he forgave them. How's that possible? It's possible because he saw God. The way we're able to live out this relationships with one another, even when we're abused, even when we're hurt, and do the things God is calling us to do, even forgiveness, one of the most difficult things of all, and to pray for our enemies, one of the most difficult things of all. The way we do that is by putting our lives in God's hands. Letting God be God in our lives. So the message today is so important. This is bottom line, folks. God is our answer. God is our answer. He is the source of our worth. We are valuable not because of us, but because of him. He is the source of our security and our significance. Even when life is hard, we are valuable. Paul said, I am what I am by the grace of God, and so are we. It's only by his grace. So like Job, you may have heard of God with your ears. You might be here today and you say, wow, I've heard a lot about God, but I've never met him. I've never had this really encounter with God. I've never seen him like Job saw him. I've never sat long enough in the presence of God to really know him, to trust him fully. I've never really, truly given him my life and said, God, whatever happens, I'm yours. Come good or bad, come blessings or devastation, God, I'm yours. Come short life, long life, come health, come illness, whatever. God, I am yours because the answer to my life is not in this stuff. It's not in how many years I live or what I have or what I do. The answer to my life is you. That is such a freeing message that when we get that, when we finally sit at the feet of God and we see Him for who He is, it frees us then to live in a powerful way, in a way of peace, in a way of hope, in a way of joy that nothing in this world can touch. Nothing in this world can ever take away. Wow. We need to have that kind of relationship with God. We need to see God in that way. And I'm hoping today that every one of us, every one of you, myself included, every one of us will let God be God in our lives. We will let God be God and realize that He is the answer to our lives. We will let Him have control. We will say to Him sometimes, God, I don't understand and I don't like what's going on. I don't like this. But God, I know that You are the answer and I will trust You no matter what. And when you do that, life will never be the same. So today I'm asking you, have you done that? Have you turned your life over to God so much that you could sit in a dung heap, scraping the pus out of the sores on your arm, having lost everything? Say to God, God, I don't get it. I don't even like it. But I will trust You. I will let You be God instead of insisting that it has to be my way. God, have Your way in my life. Have Your own way. I am the potter, God says. I'll be the clay. Mold me and make me after Your will while I am waiting, yielded and still. Let's pray. Father, as we're getting ready to sing again, it is well, it is well. I pray that You will take the message of this song and the message of this great book of Job and drive it home to us. We are often like Job and his friends who get caught up in this worldly theology of thinking everything just has to tick along in a certain way. And if you're bad, you get bad things. If you're good, you get good things. And all of that, and it doesn't work out, God will become mad at you and wonder where you are and what you're doing. And we forget just to trust You with our lives. God, I pray today we will see You as Job saw You, in all Your glory, in all Your majesty, the one who flung the stars into space and set the earth on its footings and told the ocean waves how far they must go and no further. God, You are the creator of all things. You are the one that we will stand before in the very final day and live forever with in heaven. God, that is our hope. That is our joy, our peace, our strength, our security. That is our worth. You are, God, not anything else. So I pray today, God, that You will help every one of us to do that, just to kneel before You and to turn our lives over to You fully. To say, come what may, God, we're Yours. Come what may, good or bad, we trust You and we love You because You've loved us first. And You gave Your own Son to show us how much You love us and to make it possible for us to spend eternity with You. You loved the world so much that You gave Your very best for us. We pray that You'll let us trust You fully. Thank You, Lord. Let's all stand. And today, if there's anyone here that needs prayer, we have some people gathering over here who will pray with you, will help you, counsel, whatever you need. See me, whatever. We want to be here to help. We all want to be like Job, seek God. He is our answer. It is well because of Him. Listen.
Actually decided to sing King of My Heart one more time. Sorry. But just because I feel like this is a good time to sing it. So let's sing
Never gonna let me down.
We put our faith in you. God, we trust you. We lean upon your understanding and not our own. God, we are so broken and lost without you. God, may we lean upon you, Father God, right now. Thank you, Father God, for this time of worship, for your presence, for your healing spirit, Father, for your incredible power that is awake and alive in us. Let us let you be God, Father God. May we let go of everything, holding on to things. God, teach us, show us your ways. Teach us to run to your cross and not to our own understanding. Teach us of humble love and not of self-righteousness. Teach us, Father, to let go of everything and to jump into the unknown, knowing that you, God, are there, holding on to us. Because you're good. You are a good Father. You do not let your children fall. You do not let us fall alone. You are with us every step of the way. God, you never let us go. God, may we trust you right now. May we have hope and faith in you and walk into the darkness, walk into this dark world, knowing that we have you, knowing that we have faith in you, and your strength and power is with us. We love you so much, God. It is in your powerful name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys for worshiping with us. May you have a great rest of your Sunday.